When your masterpiece is complete, you're going to want to share it. And of course, the different situations in which you're going to share your media will change the way you're going to do that. You're probably going to produce a file and you're probably going to screen it somewhere. But what exactly are you going to show? Well, there's a lovely new feature in Premiere Pro that allows us to add a lot of the information that's now available here in the overlays. This feature allows us to view or not view information about our media. We've got the same kind of feature built into our output. Let me just turn this off and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to press, in this case on Windows, Control M for media or Command M on a Mac, and this is going to take me to my export settings dialog. You're probably familiar with this already, and if you're not, there's loads of tutorials available to walk you through these settings, but this is the section I really want to draw your attention to. This is a new set of features in the export dialog. So what have we got? Well, first of all, we've got the option to apply a Lumetri look or a lookup table, and you can turn this on along with all the other options on the list by ticking the box, and then you can browse to choose any of the preset looks that are included with Premiere Pro. So you see here, I can actually get a preview right inside the output section of this dialog box. And I can even click select on this menu and browse to a look that I've created before. Here I've got one that I've created previously using Adobe SpeedGrade. I'll click open and there you go. I've got my dreamy look, or amazing as I've called it here, applied to my output. This is actually going to apply to the media file that's created, and this is particularly useful. You can see, for example, if I go to my select option again, I've got a camera 2 look option, and it's a bit more subtle. This is particularly useful if you're working with maybe camera media that you want to view in something like its finished state. If you're working with raw media, for example, you will find that it very often looks very flat, and you want to apply at least maybe a 709 color LUT to give it something like a natural look before you show people your content. Obviously, you're going to apply more subtle adjustments as you go through the edit, but this at least gives you something in the right direction. Next up, we've got this image overlay option, and this is great if you want to watermark your media. I'm going to tick this box and I'm going to click on the applied option, and I'm going to click choose. I've actually got a file, I've got a graphic that I created to use, and here we go. I've got this PNG. I'm going to click open, and you can see right away it's a little bit too massive. If I just scrub through here a little bit, it's taking up the whole screen. So I can choose a different position if I like. Let's go for top right, and I'll just scroll down a little bit more and just change the size. Well, now you see it's a little bit invisible because of the positioning, so let's just scroll up a little bit and choose bottom right instead. There we go, and that's nice and visible now, and I've got my watermark. The absolute sizing option changes the resolution of the image based on the resolution of your media, so it just means that you get relatively the same size no matter what your output media format is. Next up, pretty simple, I've got a name overlay, and let's say here, for example, this is called master sequence, the sequence I'm working on, so unsurprisingly that's the default name. If I put up here, let's call this the first cut, and rather than using the source file name, I've got a number of options here, but I can just choose to ignore the existing information and put my own data in. Let's call this first cut 001, and I'll tab out of that, and I'm giving it my own name. You'll notice, by the by, on this menu, source means the sequence itself. If I were outputting a file directly from the project panel, which of course I can do, I'd get the file name instead. This is particularly useful if you're batch processing content out to the Adobe Media Encoder. Okay, so scrolling down, I can make an offset adjustment to the position of this, and maybe I'll put that into the letterboxing. I've got the same option up here for the positioning of my logo. Let's just pull that up into our image. A little further down, I've also got this timecode overlay option. And if I turn this on, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can see by default I'm getting my media file timecode, which of course here is my sequence. If this were a clip, I'd be getting the timecode from the clip. Or I can generate the timecode. Now, you'll notice I've configured this timeline to kick off at 58 minutes. If I want to, I can generate timecode instead, and I can now specify a start timecode. And again, there's no rules about what's right or wrong here. It just depends on your workflow and the media that you're producing. But now you've got this option. In fact, let's just see if I can pull this down a little bit. I'm just clicking and dragging. There we go. And we've got this option to now have our timecode displayed burned in without going to the trouble of adding an adjustment layer and putting that classic timecode effect onto the timeline instead. So now all of these things are possible using options on the timeline inside of Premiere Pro. But isn't it wonderful that we can now incorporate them into our export settings? And much of this process is automated. Also, of course, I can now save a preset. And if I call this, well, let's make this something memorable, like this. And I can choose to include my effect settings in this preset. So if I say OK, I can now just cancel out of this, and maybe I will just choose a media file. And I'm going to press Control or Command M, and there's my preset. By default, of course, your last preset is still selected and all of the effects are included. So it's very straightforward to apply these overlays and the lookup table effect right here in your export settings.